and then you get to make a whole review on all the published papers that there are on that topic. And then after that, you have to propose what you will do for your PhD. And it's called the qualifying literature assessment. So at least that's how biomedical engineering does that. And then you don't become a real PhD candidate until you do your preliminary exam, which is what Abigail was mentioning earlier.
And it is important to know that certain structures and opportunities at the university are only open to PhD candidates, and so it's important to know when you can prelim and when that typically happens in your program. Yeah, cool. And then writing the dissertation. So I guess some of the questions that came up in the survey was, when does your dissertation get written, and what changes will it go through before you submit your dissertation? So from my experience, I know I carved out time the last semester before I defended. Yeah, Laura, I feel you. Before I defended, and every Saturday I was writing my dissertation or applying to jobs. And so it can happen gradually. Sometimes you can actually take different papers that you write and kind of fold them into your final kind of thesis or dissertation. But sometimes it can really vary based off that program too. Has any of our grad mentors started writing at all for, right? I think most of you guys are a little bit younger. So yeah, Abigail.
I've not really started on my dissertation, but I've attended, I think there's one resource that all of us should be aware of. There's the dissertation office, the thesis deposition office, and they carry out workshops through the postgraduate school for PhD students, especially if you have passed through your prelim, to explain to you what you need to do and the timelines, because the timelines are very, very, very critical. So for me, I am carefully watching my timelines for preparing the dissertation. But one thing I got from the workshop is that you could, just like Jacqueline said, you could prepare it as a form of the regular traditional dissertation format, which will have 5 chapters. Or you could prepare it as the paper, they call it the article-based format, where you have different papers that you have published and you put them together, then you have an introductory chapter and then a concluding chapter that tries to tie together all the 3 papers. So that's the format I want to go with, because I feel that would be easier for me, because I have written individual papers for the different objectives of my research. So putting them together, and through the workshop, I really enjoyed it because they made it clear that you don't have to really do much tweaking to read, but at the beginning of the chapter, each of the papers, you have to put the disclaimer there that you have published this paper in this journal, so that the dissertation office is aware that you have done that. And then your referencing, whatever referencing style you use for each of the paper is acceptable for each of the chapters. So I think for me, it's convenient, but it depends on everyone, their research, and how you want to go about it. And if your department accepts both formats.
So I can add something here. So I'm in industrial engineering department, and we don't have a qualifying exam. We need to do a certain number of classes where we have some restrictions that some of the classes can only be taken from certain pools of classes. So that's how we complete the qualifying requirement. And very close to the defense, usually like 2 semesters before the defense, we take the preliminary examination. And usually they ask for a draft thesis. Your committee asks for a very clearly laid out plan for your dissertation with maybe some submissions and some published work already. So yeah, and then you become a candidate, and then you go for the defense process. So it is true that it varies quite a bit with the department. In my department especially, people take their preliminary examination quite towards the end of their degree.
Yeah, and certainly one, as you come in, if you're coming in for a PhD program, you should expect to ask questions about what is the is there a qualifying exam? What does the prelim structure look like? You want to get a feel for that. Another question that came up in the survey was about publishing. So, why are first author papers so important? And then also, what's the difference between a conference paper and a journal article? And so, I'll just tackle really quick. First author papers are really important because those are papers that you are typically taking the lead on and you're writing. And sometimes programs will actually say you have to have X number of first author papers to graduate. So that's something, even sometimes faculty will say, this is my expectation that you'll have these first author papers. And we really do want to make sure that that you are contributing and that you are in your future grad student role, that you are, that you're contributing and leading kind of in those different research capacities. Difference between journal article and a conference paper, that is, I think, a little more nuanced. That happens in certain engineering disciplines where certain engineering disciplines, conference papers are very, very common. In other disciplines, I think it really depends. Journal articles are more common. Anyone have anything to add about, Emily, do you want to comment on that?
There we go. Now I'm unmuted, I think. That was a great overview about all of like the different types of papers. But one thing I also want to add to that is that the review process for journals and paper and conferences is often different. So I come from a program where we normally apply to conferences. There's a set date that you have to have all your materials in by. It gets reviewed by a certain date. There may or may not be a rebuttal, so that the reviewers come back and say, oh, we thought this, did you consider that? You didn't, include this reference. And then sometimes you don't have an opportunity to respond, but then other times you do. And then there's a second round of reviews. And that, when there's a kind of a rebuttal process, it's actually a little bit more like a journal in that sense, because journals, there may or may not be a deadline by which you need to apply. It's more of like a rolling basis. Maybe the reviewer is available 1 month and they review, maybe not. Then there's maybe a couple rounds of rebuttals. And to be honest, I don't know all the details because I haven't had to go through it. But my understanding is it can be a little bit more difficult to predict when you might get your reviews back, which journal edition you might actually be in, whether it's published in like March or like December of the next year. And so that's also, I think, something that's really interesting to keep in mind about, what are the expectations in terms of, am I going to be looking at conferences mostly or journals or both? And I think older students in my lab used to have like 2 journal papers and 2 conference papers. And that has evolved. And now, and like for me, I think the expectations are entirely conference papers. But even when I started my PhD, there was this thought, maybe you should apply to journals, but just as like the field has kind of changed and some of these conferences have gotten so big and so popular that it wasn't necessary anymore. So I think that's something to keep in mind too, as you're going through the review process.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, the review process in general, because I know this might be a little unfamiliar for some of you guys as undergrads. Typically, when you submit a paper in general, you're going to submit a paper to either a conference or a paper like Nature, Science, or of course any of the other ones. And then what's going to happen is that journal is going to take your paper and send it out to typically 3 reviewers who are going to read it over, either accept, reject, provide feedback, give criticisms, conditionally accept, and you'll get all that feedback typically, and you'll have to respond to those reviewers. So that's kind of a traditional process in academia, and it can look a little different for conference papers or journals. And that's something that, again, you'll want to have a discussion with your PI or your faculty member when you do that. And just trying to watch time. I know we have a whole bunch other questions. Some other questions that came up was, what is Google Scholar and an ORCID ID? So Google Scholar is actually, you can actually make a profile when you start to publish, and you can have a Google Scholar profile, which, this is a great way to kind of show and and showcase your academic publications. Sometimes even, those conferences and those conference papers or abstracts will also get picked up by Google Scholar. You can see who's citing your articles. You can track citations and over time and different citation metrics. So that's something that you should definitely be aware of, that Google Scholar is out there. And as you start doing more research and publishing, that's something that you'll probably want to make sure is an accurate representation of yourself and your research self. ORCID ID, that is actually it's like kind of a code that connects to you, and it's a digital identifier. So what that does is you have a code that you have and you control, and that distinguishes you from other researchers. And so that just, again, as you start to publish, you will kind of get your ORCID ID, and that's something that you can, again, point to that will kind of give, give your unique identifier. And Mateo, like ResearchGate is a similar service. So just know that there's different ways that you can represent yourself in academia through your research as well. Any comments on ORCID ID, Google Scholar that our mentors want to add at all? I think those are pretty straightforward. So cool. Yeah, and then, Emily?
I'm just going to say really quickly, some employers now ask for those too, so that they can more easily see your summary of papers and what your citations are. So it may or may not be something that comes up in job interviews as well.
Yeah, and so Alex, you were asking about Google Scholar, ORCID, and the grad school application. Yeah, as an undergrad, this might not be something that you have. If you have it, then that's something you could certainly kind of either like use kind of up at the top or of your resume or CV. That's something you could work in. It's not something that you will necessarily like put into the meat of your resume, but something that you can certainly include. Another thing that I know.
I want to just interject there, Jackie, a couple ideas on that. So kind of like Jackie's saying, kind of like people do with a LinkedIn profile, including it up at the top. You can also list some of those things where you list out your publications. If you do have publications, you can link out to them if they are posted in kind of a public location like that, to be able to have that as well. And you can also mention things like that in your statement of purpose if you've done quite a bit of research and have something that you want to really draw attention to.
Yeah, and I actually just did another. Oh yeah, Mateo, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so just real quickly, I think all of these terms are kind of hard to understand from an undergrad perspective, but essentially it's all down to research impact. So your ResearchGate score, ORCID, how many papers you've published is essentially how effective you've been as a researcher. And these are just different ways of gauging that metric. Okay, like how many conferences you were at, or if you published at a conference versus a journal. Journal is typically more prestigious, but it depends. It's all just metrics for how to gauge how good of a researcher you are.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. So another couple of questions that came up was in regard to, so again, research and citing and kind of doing a literature review. And so there's a question about what is overleaf, LaTeX, and Mendeley. And so just taking a big step back, these overleaf will actually work very closely with LaTeX, although I haven't had experience with overleaf. I've used Mendeley, and that's just another way of, as you're doing your research and going through the literature and finding the relevant publications that might be relevant to your work, you will cite those things and you will talk about them in your papers. And so it's a way, Mendeley is a way of kind of keeping track of those different papers and allowing you to kind of cite them. And some other, like I know when I was in grad school, I was using EndNote because that interfaced with Microsoft. So again, it's just different citation methods. Yeah, certainly different citation softwares. So, and then I guess I'll jump over to different, some other questions in the Menti. We're focusing on like appointments, classes, and careers. And so there was a question of what is tenure? And that's tenure is actually something that a professor will go through. They start off as an assistant professor, and then after typically 6 years, they'll go up for tenure. And that's the tenure and review process is actually where that particular faculty member kind of puts in their package of teaching, research, mentoring to the department and says, I want to move from assistant professor to associate professor. And the department will kind of review their work in the department over those past 5 or 6 years. And so how does this affect you as a future grad student or maybe even undergrad? Well, that's, if you're coming in with the professor who's pre-tenure, you're going to want to have that conversation of, what if you don't get tenure? Because that might happen. And what would be your plan for your graduate students? Or what if you decide to not go up for tenure here and you move to another university? So you always want to have that conversation about tenure. And just knowing that if you're coming into a research group, if you join with a assistant professor who's pre-tenure versus a tenured full professor, your mentoring relationship and dynamic might look a little different. So just know that the lab might also look different with an established professor that's been there a really long time versus a younger, newer assistant professor. There's not a better or worse choice. It really depends on the faculty member. Yeah, Angel.
Yeah, I had because right now I'm in the middle of my advisor just got tenure. So if I talk with the older students, I get the experience where they were beginning to all of this, and they had literally the mentoring from my advisor hands-on. Versus me, I have to I still met him, but I get most of my advice from the group. So that's also going to be different. And I guess something else that I have seen is that people that when you go to the first 2-3 cohorts of the advisor, because that person is trying to get papers, it will be maybe a different pace from when the advisor has the tenure. So definitely something to consider where you're selecting advisors.
I'd also like to add that if you join a professor's lab who's just become a professor, most of the first year or 2 years of your PhD will probably be actually setting up the lab and developing all of the experimental processes that go into actually producing your work. And eventually that may actually increase the length of your PhD, which is something that you should probably keep in mind. I have personal experience with this if anyone would like to talk about it.
Yeah, it can also be a little bit stressful if you're joining into a faculty member who's pre-tenure. I was also in a lab, and my PI got tenure while I was there, and it was things need to get done a little bit faster because you need to show, or that assistant professor needs to show results, really need to show that they're making an impact. So yeah, excellent. So a couple more questions. What is an accelerated master's? I think that question might have been in regard to potentially dual BS MS degrees for the accelerated master. Happy to talk about that a little bit more offline if anyone has any questions. But there were questions about plan of study and what is a core class. And so I'll quickly field those. That typically a plan of study when you start in for a graduate degree and really a PhD, you'll have your plan of study of the classes you plan on taking and kind of the benchmarks you plan to hit. So that is something that's really important for your plan of study. And core classes can be classes within the department that the department really requires you to take. Does anyone, and then I guess we'll kind of transition over to one more question of where do you, as graduate students, get your resources? Like, who do you lean on as a resource at your institution? And if you're struggling, I guess, who do you reach out to as a grad student?
I guess I'll start by saying I have a lab that's very collaborative and has a lot of older students, and I really lean on them. And so it was great when I was first starting out in pre-COVID times, because we would just go in and we would chat, and it was really, really easy to just overhear things and start asking them these sorts of questions. I feel a little bit bad. I was having a conversation with a new student today who's literally never set foot in the lab or met our professor, and he has to like manually set up Zoom times and like, you know, to be more explicit about kind of learning all this information. So I was fortunate that like and you know, if I'm ever overwhelmed or like I can't get the GPUs working, or, you know, there's just like something that I don't understand from a reviewer, but like my professor, you know, sometimes he like understands, but like I don't. And so, you know, talking with students about these sorts of frustrations has been really, really helpful for me, because my family doesn't understand them. And so that was like the big thing for me, where like I could tell my family I was stressed, but they wouldn't like necessarily knew what that exact problem was that I was going through. And so for me, talking to other graduate students has been very helpful in finding the support I need.
I also would like to add that, like, I know from some friends that some groups are like more interactive than others, like together, and some groups are not. So also your cohort, like the people in your class when you start the PhD, are also really helpful. Like sometimes they're not from my same field, but I can talk to them and we get through, and they help me a lot, like looking at things from different perspectives. So if you happen to join a group that is not like that cooperative, or it's a small group, like making friends from like your same year is also helpful.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, for adding that. And I guess we'll wrap up with kind of the, you know, kind of some more logistic questions about what are fellowships, what are assistantships, what are different type of assistantships, and then basically how does health insurance work as a graduate student. So I'll quickly start by saying that, you know, fellowships are certainly the pinnacle, like the most prestigious kind of funding that you can get as a graduate student. And then there are also different forms of funding that support you as a graduate student, like research assistantships and teaching assistantships, and some other kind of graduate administrative assistantships. All will provide you with free tuition for your graduate studies, so you won't be paying for tuition, and then also a stipend or a salary or a paycheck for every month. So do know that in terms of fellowships, research assistantships, and teaching assistantships, the requirements of what you're doing under those funding umbrellas can change, but there is money for you to do your graduate school for free and to get paid to do your graduate studies. So, and then in terms of health insurance, how does that work as a graduate student? It can really depend on how you're being funded. Some fellowships will pick that up. Some assistantships you'll be paying for that with kind of your salary. Does any of our grad students want to kind of chime in about how their health insurance works, or how they face that? And if, you know, are you paying a lot for health insurance? Are you able to kind of live off of the money that you get paid? Laura, yeah.
So I'm funded so I have a fellowship, but currently I'm funded on something that's called a training grant from NIH. And the way that works is the department is given a certain amount of money, and part of that money is split into salaries for grad students. And this is then, there's like a certain allotment for health insurance that isn't directly paid to the health insurance company, but it's paid to me. And then I take that and I pay like a healthcare premium for either 6 months or the full year. And that's how that works for me. It's almost completely covered, which is really nice. And I don't really have to pay any copays. Like, it's a pretty comprehensive health insurance. And I can use it, like I've used it outside of the Purdue health system, and it is great. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Vanessa? You are muted, Vanessa.
Okay, so when I first started, I was on a RA, and so we got the student insurance that Purdue offers, the grad staff insurance, and that was really good. But then once I became on my fellowship, then I had to get the domestic student insurance, which is a little bit more expensive, but with the fellowship I was on, they give you money to pay for your insurance, so it kind of equals out.
One other comment I'll just make related to insurance is if you have dependents, so if you have a spouse or children or other dependents that you need to cover, those are often options on the health insurance, but their premiums will usually go up with that. So that's something to just be aware of when you're at the point of being admitted and being given a funding offer, to look at what those premiums actually are for your particular situation, if you're insuring just yourself or if you have family that you're insuring as well.
Excellent. So I think we got through almost all of the different topics that came up. Does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to throw those in the chat about grad school jargon. If not, we will break out into breakout rooms. And you can certainly talk a little bit more about these different topics with your grad mentors. I am also going to drop some things in the chat really quick. Some quick action items for things for you to do in your circle. And then we will come back around 8:20. And we will talk a little bit more about GradTrack Trophy and what's going to happen over break. But really quick, so some of the things I'm going to drop in the chat is, if you can take a quick screenshot of your group and then also post it into the Slack channel. It'd be great to have just kind of a fall, like, yes, we won semester, we've done it, of you and your group, if you're able to do that. And then feel free to discuss any of the questions or ask any questions to your mentors about the jargon that we went over. There's also some more information in our in the action pack, some more questions for you guys to go over if you need that. And then, if you kind of wrap up those questions, certainly talk about anything else from the semester that you might have questions about, and thinking forward a little bit, not only thinking back, but thinking forward. What's kind of the game plan for each undergrad student over break? Are you planning on applying for summer research? Are you planning on applying for graduate school? We want to know, and we want to celebrate that as well. And then what we're going to plan to do is have a t-shirt design team competition. So every team, if you can, come up with a design. And we will be ordering these t-shirts in the spring semester and mailing them out to everyone. So t-shirt design, whoever comes up with the best, we will be voting in the spring in terms of who has the best design. So I dropped that in there. And what I'll do right now is, if no one has any questions, I will open up the rooms.
Before you do that, Jackie, should I mention the video at this point?
Yeah, get over to Janet really quick for video.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you all a heads up and do a call for some volunteers. So we are going to, spring semester will be here before we know it. We will be starting to open up the application for next year's cohort of GradTrack, which is hard to believe. But in order to help convey more about what the program is about, we're going to try to put together a short video of some of the things that we've done over the course of this year. And so we'll be using some of the recordings that we've done of some of the sessions just as B-roll. So we won't be having people's voices or anything, but just to be able to show kind of what it looks like on screen and how people are interacting. But I want to just let you all know that that's part of our plan. So if anybody does have concerns with potentially your picture or your name appearing in this video, definitely reach out to me. You can either message me or send me an email, let me know, because we definitely want to be respectful if somebody doesn't want to be presented there in any way. And then the other thing I'm going to be asking you for to include in this video is we'll be looking for some volunteers to come and be interviewed with us to talk about your experiences. So we're looking for a couple of mentors as well as some participating students. So if this is something that you would be interested in doing like a 30-minute interview with us to record your experiences. Again, please email me, let me know. I will be tapping some of you if you don't volunteer, but if anybody is interested in being somebody to come and share your experiences. For the Purdue students, if you're on campus, we'll probably do those in person. And then for any of the non-Purdue students, we would do this over Zoom and just do a recorded session with one of my colleagues who's going to actually be putting the video together for us. We'll be looking at doing those interviews, hopefully still yet kind of this semester. So over the next several weeks between now and early December, early to mid-December. Some of them we could also push into early January, but we know that with people's holiday schedules, sometimes people are on different schedules. So we can kind of work around your schedule a little bit, but we are looking at hopefully getting those done in the next few weeks. Because we're hoping to have a draft video potentially to kind of show all of you at the January meeting. We'll see if we can meet that deadline. The other thing that I would love for all of you to do, if you're willing, is to take a picture of your workstation, like you at your workstation, or kind of the view of where you're sitting and what that looks like, and post that out on Slack. I think this would be fun to kind of see, both for all of you, and then we might include some of this in the video to kind of show that, you know, this is kind of how we're all connecting. You know, we're all in very different environments. Some of us are in office settings, lab settings, home on the couch. I'm down in my basement. You know, there's just these different settings where we are. It'd be fun to get some shots of that. So think of kind of like an Instagram style photo. If you can take a photo and post that out on Slack, we would love to use that in this video too. So just kind of a heads up that some of those requests are coming, and any of you that are interested in joining me, feel free to message me or send me an email, and would love to have you help out. And I know Jackie already mentioned, take a screenshot of your mentor circles tonight, and some of those we may include in the video as well. Again, we're not recording people's voices in any of these meetings or anything like that. This is really a closed conversation for all of you, but we may have just some of these images to try to let others know what this is like for them to get together and connect up. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Janet. I was gonna say, no one wants to see my messy desk, trust me. But I will open up those rooms, the breakout rooms, and feel free to go in and chat. And you guys should be able to move yourself in as well. And screen sharing should also be on. So go, enjoy, and chat. And I will see you at 8:20. I'm going to very quickly talk a little bit about the GradTrack trophy. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. I'm going to open up the chat too really quick. Yes, Laura, you definitely can. So really quick. So the GradTrack trophy. So I know I've been emailing and alluding to this for the last 2 or 3 emails I sent. But we are now going to develop the GradTrack trophy, and how you can get the trophy is by receiving points for your team. And each person can receive 10 points for attending our monthly meetings, and then submitting the monthly assignments through Box. What we're going to touch upon in the spring is we're actually going to implement some one-on-one meetings. And then any summer programs that you apply to, or any graduate programs you apply to, we would love to know about that. And you can get 10 points for each of those summer research programs and each of those graduate programs you apply to. So great, easy way of jacking up your team's points right there. And you know how you can let us know about these things. I'm tracking kind of attendance at each of our monthly meetings and the submission mentors. Once you have one-on-one meetings, we can certainly discuss this more, but we do have the attendance Google Doc that you can report that on. And then for our undergrad students, as you're applying for summer research and grad applications, you know, we really want to know about this. So, you know, certainly add a quick post on the Slack channel so that we can celebrate you and celebrate all the good work you're doing. And so what really does the winning team get? They're going to get certainly something a little extra special at the end of the spring semester, in addition to your awesome GradTrack t-shirt that you're going to get, and also bragging rights, right? This is the very first GradTrack year, and then the very first GradTrack trophy. So, so very excited about that. And then I guess another question that you might have is, how are team points calculated, because different teams have different amounts of people. So every person will be able to earn points. But then the points are going to be normalized per circle by the average number of points per person. So points will get normalized for the number of people in your circle. And the circle with the highest overall performance or number of points per person will win. So the current standings right now is that Circle 2 is actually in the lead with an average number of 58.75 points per person in their circle. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Circle 2 for beasting it this fall. But we still have time. There's a really small spread between really the top 5 circles right now. So anyone can really win. And I really encourage you guys to keep engaging and try to oust the number 1. So really quick, let's go, Jose, right? So really quick, some of the assignments that are that you should be looking for this next couple months, because we will not be meeting until January. Again, if you're interested in being showcased in the video that Janet was talking about earlier, certainly reach out to her, or if you need, you can reach out to me and I can share it with her. So both mentors and mentees, we'd love to have you and highlight you and your good work. And then, I know some of you guys were already submitting a photo of where you're zooming in from on Slack. So keep it up, keep it going. I know that we did statement of purpose resubmissions and this last month. So if you have any of those, please feel free to drop that into the box link again. And that is on the Slack general channel. And I will still continue to count those in terms of the points for GradTrack trophy. But mentors, if you make sure you're talking with the students and sharing back those comments, they do not have access to the box document link. So you might have to share that back with them. And certainly make sure both mentees and mentors that you're having a conversation when you're submitting something and when those revisions are happening. And then really until this break, I really encourage you to kick butt on your finals and really focus in on your classes, but then also thinking about professionally what you can do for applying to those summer research programs and applying to graduate programs, depending on the stage that you're at. And then hopefully some of you guys got to talk over your t-shirt design in your circles today. And if not, then definitely encourage you to chat that over in the Slack, or if you want to have another quick meeting, feel free to discuss that. And then really things to look forward to for the spring. We'll talk about this a little bit more in January, but do want to start to promote and encourage at least one dedicated one-on-one meeting with your GradTrack mentor in the spring semester. And then we're going to keep going with that GradTrack trophy. So certainly you want to post in the Slack how many programs you applied to. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I know, Abigail, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I want to ask, do you want the teams to do the t-shirt design as a group, or you want the individuals to send t-shirt design?
I would love if you guys could work together as a group on it. I don't want this t-shirt design to just fall on the grad mentors, because that should not happen. I want all of you guys, undergrads, you guys are creative, you guys are awesome. I want to see what you guys can come up with. So make sure that you are working together as a team to come up with that. If one of the undergrads wants to really take the lead on that, then feel free to do so. But again, this should not be following on the GradTrack graduate student mentors. I really want to empower you guys as undergrads to take this and run with it. So yeah, thanks. Great question, Abigail. Any other questions? Any other exciting news that's happened with the group that anyone wants to unmute and share out for the last minute or so? And I know that I was really excited because I got to see a number of you guys at the Graduate Diversity Visitation Program. And then I also ran into Jahan at the SHIP conference this past week. So this was really exciting as well. So
it was great to see you in person.
Mm-hmm. It was. Excellent. Any other good news? No? Okay. Well, I hope you guys all have a really safe Thanksgiving and safe travels and have a great end of your semester. And I hope you'll be nice and energized as we're starting the spring. So, and I'll hang on. Yeah. Abigail, did you have something else?
Yeah, a quick question. The screenshots we took of in our groups, where do you want us to post it? In the Slack channel?
Yeah, I will start just a quick one in the general channel. And you can reply to that thread. So,
okay.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. Well, it's so nice seeing everyone. Have a great rest of your night. And thank you for your time and for engaging in. I will see you in 2022.
Amazing.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Great holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.